going to have some slides here about the science of fun, how play supports children's development and well-being. So I'm going to start off, and I'm going to just do a tiny bit of housekeeping. So if you're joining on a tablet or phone, headphones tends to work best with sound. Please do use the chat and questions, and we'll try and answer it as either as we go along, or at the end we'll have a Q&A session. We are recording the webinar, so that if you need to leave or if people haven't been able to make it, we can send you the recording back very shortly. So the chat won't be recorded, and nobody's face, can't see anybody's faces apart from Jamie's, mine, and hopefully soon Sinead's. And but yeah, so we do love to interact with you and hear what your questions and curiosities are. A bit of an outline about this webinar. I'll hand over to Jamie in a second, who's going to talk about the importance of play for everyone. Then over to me to talk about supporting children with social and emotional development through play. And then with any luck, Sinead will join us, and we'll talk about her wonderful experiences of using Lego brick-based therapy in a play therapy context. So over to you, Jamie. Let me stop sharing. Was I sharing then or not? I was, because my stop share has disappeared. Ah, Sinead is here. Hooray. Well done, Sinead. All right. Wonderful. Over to you, Jamie.
Fantastic. And hopefully everyone can see my slides up there, and welcome again. And just to reiterate Gina's point, you know, any questions or anything that comes up, do drop them in the chat. So I've got a kind of real whistle-stop tour through a bunch of different kind of ideas that we're just going to kind of knit together to build this, to help illustrate how important play is for all of us. We're going to look at a kind of current story around cognition, around how we think. We're going to look at another area of work that looks at universal difficulties we all experience. And we're going to look at how these two combined help us to understand why we play, and what the benefits of play are. A little bit of a teaser or giveaway around why we might play in that last bullet point there. So very quickly, this is a very simplified summary of kind of what our theories around cognition, how we think, used to be, and the progression they've made. So very kind of simplistically, we used to have this idea that cognition was quite passive. We were this sort of cognitive couch potato, and we'd sit around and we'd wait for sensory information to come into us through our eyes and our ears and our nose and inside our body. We'd pull together all of that sensory information as we received it, piece it together, and then experience something. So it's quite a passive way of processing the world. And Andy Clark, who does wonderful work in this area, talks about the difference between kind of being a cognitive couch potato, which is what we used to think, to instead now an understanding that we're much less passive than we thought. And actually, we are these sort of prediction-making machines. And we go around looking to make predictions about the world around us. Because a lot of the time, we need to take action before we receive information that tells us about what's going on. So it makes sense to run away from a predator before it's eating us, rather than waiting for it to be eating us and process the fact, oh, I'm being eaten, I need to do something now. So we are making these predictions. So we must be in some way calling upon some sort of model that we can use to make these predictions, some sort of model of the world that allows us to make these kind of guesses as to what we might experience. So we're constantly trying to guess what might cause sensory information that we're receiving. And our brains are on this sort of conscious, continual mission to try to kind of stay one step ahead of this sensory information we receive. We'll illustrate this with a little example. So we got an auditory example and a non-auditory example. So what I need you guys to do is just to listen to a noise I'm about to play you. It's not the most pleasant noise, so if you are listening on headphones, super loud, just brace yourself. But otherwise, you just have to listen to the noise. So here we go. So hopefully we all heard a noise there, a kind of squeaky R2D2E type noise. What I would like us to do now is and I can't check to see that you're all doing this, so there's a huge amount of trust. I want you to say out loud, the camel was kept in a cage at the zoo.
Camel was kept in a cage at the zoo.
Excellent, Gina. I was especially looking at you because I can see whether or not you're cheating. Okay, so the camel was kept in a cage at the zoo. We've all had a go at saying that. The camel was kept in a cage at the zoo. And we'll go back and listen to our noise again, remembering about the camel who was kept in a cage at the zoo. One more time, I'll replay that sound. So the second time we heard that sound, we should have experienced something different from the first time we listened to that sound. And I'll talk more about that. We'll look at our kind of non-auditory example. Here we've got a visual image on the screen, and your brain's going to be trying to make a best guess as to what this might be. It's going to be looking at these kind of wiggly, curvy lines and trying to make a good prediction about what this is, but probably struggling because purposely borrowed this image to be something that is hopefully going to be hard to match to any existing models you might have. And again, if I give you a little bit more information and say, well, the mystery picture is a mermaid swimming down diagonally past a porthole, and we look again, then suddenly it appears that we can make some more meaning from that picture. That description gave you more information, which meant you could attach it to existing models or experiences in your past, and that allowed you to make a kind of better prediction or guess as to what it was you were experiencing. In the same way, when I played that sound originally, you just heard a kind of squeaking noise. When I gave you some more information, you were able to kind of piece that together to make a different guess as to what you might be experiencing. So this is a really kind of roundabout way of illustrating how we make meaning in the world, and by building up these models of the world based on sensory information that we receive. We use these models in combination with information we're receiving to make guesses about what we're experiencing, because we can never truly know what we're experiencing because we don't have access to it. My brain can never jump out of my head and have a good sniff around as to what's causing sensory input that I'm receiving. I never have direct access to the cause of that sensory input. I only have access to the sensory information itself. And it's actually quite a good way of operating. It's a really efficient way of operating. It means we're not walking around surprised all the time as we process bits of sensory information and then experience something. It also means with these models, they provide kind of quick shortcuts to help us understand situations we're in, so we don't necessarily have to process all the information around us. And all of this helps the brain towards achieving its main aim. So we're thinking about the fundamental aim of really what my brain is trying to do, and that's ultimately keep us alive. That's really number one. Everything else is a bonus. If my brain gets me to the end of the day and I'm still alive, it's very pleased with itself as it has managed to achieve that. Now, the main way it keeps us alive is it regulates our resources. It makes sure we don't run out of resources. If we run out of resources, we die. Our main resource as a biological organism is metabolic, it's energy. So really, in order to keep us alive, what it does is it tries to regulate our energy, tries to keep us energy efficient. So right now I'm reasonably energy efficient. My heart rate It's a little bit elevated because I'm excited about talking, but it's reasonably sustainable. So my brain's not too upset with me currently. And hopefully all of you guys are in a nice kind of rest and digest. Maybe some of you have got lots of excitement at listening to us, and so you've got a slightly elevated heart rate. But broadly speaking, you know, my brain is trying to keep me in my most energy efficient state, trying to keep me in a certain temperature state, not too hungry, or well, not hungry at all, not thirsty, not needing the toilet, all these things to basically make sure I can be as energy efficient as possible. Now, to do that, to be energy efficient, I need to understand the world around me. I need to know what's going on in the world so I know the most energy efficient course of action to take. So if I wake up and look outside and it's snowing, then I know, okay, I should probably put on an extra jumper to keep me warm, and that'll stop me shivering. Shivering's not a sustainable use of my energy, so my brain doesn't really want me to do that. And as I said, there's an issue in terms of understanding the world around me that my brain has, which is it's trapped inside this dark box. It can't hop out and look around. So what it does is it uses the data it has access to, which is sensory information, and it builds the models of the world through statistical regularities. So every time it snows, it's cold. I can then start to build up a model where when it snows, I expect it to be cold. So we start to build these models. This understanding of cognition helps us to recognize how we all therefore have unique models of the world. We all have differences in the way we experience the world, not necessarily disorders or dysfunctions or deficiencies, but differences depending on how we experience the world, what we've experienced in the world, and how we weight the sensory information that we've experienced. So our world is built up of those models that we hold and the way that we're processing current sensory information. So that's a very brief introduction to something called predictive processing. Now, in a very kind of sharp segue that's not particularly linked, I'm going to now also introduce another kind of broad bit of research around kind of mental health, and the two are very much sort of linked, and we'll get there. It's not too tortuous, but in terms of kind of mental health, there's been a large body of work that started to just interrogate a little bit categorical definitions of mental health difficulties. So things like depression, generalized anxiety disorder, these kind of big constructs, and just looking at the kind of utility of those in terms of understanding the unique needs of each individual who might present with that categorical need. So the unique needs of different people who might all be classified as having clinically significant depression or a generalized anxiety disorder, because there was a growing recognition that it's not a one size fits all, that just because two people share the same diagnosis doesn't mean that they'll both respond the same way to a type of support that's there to help them out. And therefore, people wanted to see, is there a better way for us to understand the unique difficulties that somebody's experiencing, and to therefore create more effective and better support for that individual, rather than necessarily a sort of generic type of support. So instead of designing support for a diagnosis, we can design support for an individual. And that led researchers to start to break open those large categories. So generalized anxiety disorder, to break that down into the specific symptoms of that need. So generalized anxiety disorder, you've got 8 specific symptoms, and they then wanted to look at, okay, how do these interact with one another? And so started to build these little network maps to look at these relationships. And that explains these slightly scary looking diagrams I've got up on the slide there. These are examples of network maps, and those circles are called nodes. And in mental health work, those circles would typically be a symptom or a need. And those lines going in between, they're called edges. And the stronger and darker the lines, the stronger the relationship between those different nodes or different elements. And increasingly what this work was doing was highlighting how different diagnoses don't occur in complete isolation. So there's elements of PTSD that individuals with a generalized anxiety disorder might experience. There's elements of generalized anxiety disorder that people with ADHD might experience. And so looking at this interaction across and between these different clusters of need. And increasingly in this work, what was being revealed was that these mental health difficulties that people experienced seem to all be linked to larger underlying factors. So you seem to be able to kind of load all these difficulties onto these kind of larger superordinate difficulties. So you can see here, we've got kind of specific representations in these boxes down at the bottom. So you can think of those as kind of specific symptoms or behaviors that people are demonstrating. And you can see this sort of above here, we've got these different circles and lines, and that's really tracking back from those individual needs to these kind of broader categories that themselves are grouped under these larger categories. So they're around externalizing difficulties, internalizing difficulties, thought disorders. And then sitting above them, you've got this P that seems to be this kind of puppet master sitting above everything, holding everything together. There's perhaps a kind of clearer view there. That all of this kind of work started to kind of suggest that underpinning all these difficulties that we might experience as a human was a single factor. What this analysis does in this network work is it says statistically whether there seems to be a single thing holding all these networks together, and therefore a really good target for support, because if we knock that out, we might knock out the whole network. But it doesn't tell you what it is. And so there began a big search for this P factor. What is this kind of 1P that is going to rule everything? Because if we can find out what that is and design support for that, then we've got a much more efficient and effective type of support rather than this piecemeal adoption of isolated interventions for specific needs. If we can see this kind of broader issue that's central to sustaining this network of difficulties, we target that, we might get this therapeutic cascade knocking out all the other difficulties. So there's a frantic hunt for this P factor. And the candidate that we tend to focus on is uncertainty. And I could talk for a long time about this, but I'm not going to. But essentially, if we think back to the main aim of our brain, well, it's to keep us alive, and it does that by understanding the world around us. So uncertainty is a threat to that. If I don't understand the world around us, or I have those unknowns, it's a threat to my brain's ability to do this. So it kind of makes sense that we wouldn't want to experience that uncertainty. And if you look at it just from your own life, if you track back when you've had difficulties or you found something hard, you'll be able to eventually track it back to uncertainty. And certainly if we think back to the pandemic, it was quite clear that the fundamental issue there was uncertainty. But what's important to kind of think about is that our brain doesn't want to just completely remove uncertainty. That actually one of the things or one of the big certainties we have in life is that it's filled with uncertainty. So actually my brain, to be effective in an uncertain environment, needs to be really good at resolving uncertainty. So it actually doesn't want there to be no uncertainty whatsoever. It wants opportunities to experience uncertainty, learn from it, and to get even better at navigating and managing uncertainty. So a real kind of champion brain is one that's really good at minimizing uncertainty, reducing that uncertainty. And to do that, it needs opportunities to practice. So this kind of drive towards reducing uncertainty, and that's the brain feeling like it's doing the best thing that it can do as a brain, is one explanation for why our brains don't take us off to a dark room and have us sit there quietly. Because at first glance, looking at kind of predictive processing and this need for kind of knowledge and wanting to stay away from the unknown, we would think that we were kind of surprise avoidant, that we would want to go into this dark room, sit there, and that's great. You know, we don't have any uncertainty here. But we don't do that. And even more strangely, there's lots of times when we appear to put ourselves in situations of heightened uncertainty. For example, play. When we're playing, and if you look at children in particular, a lot of their play is about uncertainty and exposing themselves to uncertainty. So testing the edges and margins, the limits of what they're able to do, their current knowledge and understanding. And one of the benefits of this is that it enables me to learn more about my environment and myself. And that can gradually increase my ability to reduce uncertainty over time. And play affords us situations where we have just the right amount of uncertainty. So I'm actively trying to kind of create errors to violate my expectations that I'm also able to then resolve. So what we're doing is we're trying to seek out optimal opportunities to reduce uncertainty in new and interesting ways. We're constantly kind of chasing manageable uncertainty in service of future uncertainty reduction. So all of this kind of play, and particularly adventurous play, or what used to be called kind of risky play, can really help us in doing this. So we're in control over our lack of control, and the uncertainty we're exposing to us is kind of couched in familiar frames around kind of play and these things that we might do in a play situation. So it allows us to better face uncertainty in the future, this sort of testing expectations, exploring boundaries, learning about our own capacities through making mistakes in low stakes situations, is really, really important. And again, you might see kids kind of self-handicapping to test these margins more. So all of this stuff that we're doing in play is increasing our two big routes out of uncertainty, that this fundamental issue that we're constantly trying to address. And those two big things that help drive us out of uncertainty are knowledge and agency. So knowledge, just knowing things. Agency is, you can think of it in terms of control, or my perceived ability to control myself in my environment. And we can tie that in with all the kind of self-esteem, self-concept, self-efficacy. And again, we go back to the pandemic. All of us faced uncertainty. We might have tried to knowledge our way out of it, reading everything we could about COVID and how to avoid it or manage it. Or we might have tried to agency our way out of it, that exaggerated need for control, and we run out and buy all the toilet paper we can find. But play provides those opportunities to increase that knowledge, increase that agency. So that kind of exploration, that novelty seeking, lets us harvest information about the unknown, about the edges and horizons, and improve our knowledge and understanding, and ultimately improving our kind of agency. So that playfulness and playing with uncertainty means we can learn about lots of important things. And from a mental health perspective, we can learn about fear, uncertainty, and coping with that fear, and particularly just the physiological experience of fear, becoming more familiar with that arousal and developing coping strategies. If we don't have knowledge about that physiological arousal, about what it feels in me, then all we're going to be experiencing is uncertainty, and that in turn will trigger stress responses, and we'll end up in a kind of negative cycle there. And it's increasing our ability to kind of manage uncertainty moving forward, and as well avoids kind of misinterpretations of physiological arousal. We also know there's a big feedback loop around mood and play, because again, my brain wants to be a really good error minimizer. And therefore it gets a release of kind of lots of sort of hormonal high fives when we manage to resolve uncertainty. So it puts us in a good mood. But the more we get that good mood, the more it has a kind of lasting impact on us. And therefore we have an overall more positive expectation about our ability to manage and deal with adversity and uncertainty that makes us more likely to go and seek it out and explore it, that in turn gives us more opportunities to feel good, that in turn increases our mood. So there's that positive feedback loop. And with any feedback loop, it can also have an inverse or negative equivalent where we don't play, it doesn't increase our mood, it decreases our perception of our ability to manage novelty and uncertainty, which in turn reduces our desire to engage in those things. A last point there as well, this kind of increasing our knowledge and understanding of the world also increases our knowledge and understanding of ourselves. We talked about that kind of physiological understanding. And having a good understanding of myself makes it easier for me to understand others. Because again, as we have models of the world to help us navigate it, like when it snows, it's cold, I also have models of people. And those models of people are typically made and built out of my understanding of myself. So again, there's a kind of feedback loop there between understanding me and understanding others. And what we've seen is a real decrease in potential opportunities for play. And anecdotally, we know that in education settings, everything's become much more high stakes. Even narratives to parents, your child misses one day at school and suddenly they'll fall behind a whole GCSE grade. For students, there's incredible high stakes for every day at school. That if they're not concentrating or don't do well on this or that, then these catastrophic consequences for the rest of their life are either implicitly or explicitly told to them. And also just opportunities for free play, for full agency in my ability to pursue play opportunities are also greatly reduced. We can see here, this is from a Play England report looking at the percentage of participants who agreed there was freedom to go and explore in childhood. So that exploring the edges and margins and learning about our world, you can see that steady decrease through generations about how much you were able to explore. And we see a correlation between that decrease in the amount of time that we can explore and an increase in mental health difficulties. So this graph here showing levels of psychological distress split between adults who said they had a lot of freedom to go and explore when they were kids and those that didn't. And you can see a significant difference there for those that had more freedom to explore when they were little compared to those that didn't. And it's a correlation. There's lots of other factors at play. But again, we know theoretically that there's a good reason for that in terms of those opportunities that play afforded. So the important thing we need to take away then is we need to do more play and we need to recognize the benefits of it. We need to lower the stakes of situations by using play, allowing kids to take risks. And that can be big risks or small risks, but there's a greater risk in not doing that. And we need to make sure we've got a pro play mindset in everything we're doing, making it playful, making it fun, and therefore making it more likely to be engaging. So we looked at a lot of different bits and bobs, and it was really just a gentle introduction to some of the science of play there. There's a couple of pointers to further reading that, again, we'll share. We build out on this fundamental difficulty around uncertainty in our book, my colleague Claire and I up there. And then I've also included a couple of gateway papers into what we've talked about here. Helen Dodd's paper there, and anything from Helen Dodd is brilliant in terms of looking at benefits of play, particularly around mental health. And then looking at that relationship between play and predictive processing, another good kind of gateway paper there that perhaps can get slightly dense sometimes, but they do a very good job at communicating some pretty complex ideas. And that's me. I'll hand over to Gina.
Amazing. Thanks, Jamie. That is incredibly interesting and wonderful. And I think you know, oh, I've lost everybody. Hopefully, you can all still see me. Hopefully, it's all very clear how important play is for everyone. Can I just check that you can see my slides at the moment, or not yet?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. Can you still see them?
Yes.
Hooray. So as you know, I mean, I'm going to move on to talk about play as a kind of therapeutic methodology, and I think Sinead will go even deeper into that. So it's kind of going from sort of play as something that's just universally important for all of us, but then maybe for some children, play might be particularly important, or in certain contexts or certain life experiences, play might be even more relevant. So as you know, I work at Play Included, and a lot of our expertise lies in neurodivergent children. But we believe, as Jamie does, that play-based methodologies are actually relevant for everybody. Play is a fantastic way to support children who might face challenges with social interaction, that might face challenges with communication or emotional well-being. Maybe children who get very anxious in social situations. Since the pandemic, particularly, we've seen that that's been an issue, along with sort of communication because of lockdowns and being isolated. Play is great for children who experience low self-esteem, social isolation, or bullying, who are lonely or excluded. And a lot of these factors are especially true for neurodivergent children, maybe children with mental health difficulties or children with particular life experiences or who face different societal barriers. The play it's not just something you do to pass the time or something fun or something irrelevant. It's actually really essential for development. There's a huge value of being quite affirmative with play. And by that, I mean that there's no right or wrong way to play. And I think this is particularly relevant for neurodivergent children, where play has often been sort of pathologized and thought that play is different or is absent or stereotypical in some way. That's often been part of the diagnostic process in autism, for example. But it's useful to think about play as a way of exploring the world, as Jamie said, to try and sort of build our knowledge and understanding. So there can't be a right or a wrong way to play if you're kind of exploring the world around you. Play is a really important opportunity to show your skills and interests. You can connect with others through play if you like the same things. And that we really find with our Brick by Brick programme that having an accepting space for children who might otherwise be excluded, where you can play together, is just so important for children to build a positive identity, a sense of belonging and confidence. And we also know from research with autistic adults that play can be a really brilliant escape that helps manage anxiety and promote communication and friendships. So I'm going to talk to you about Play Included's Brick by Brick programme, which is a bit of a reimagination of Lego brick-based therapy to try and include much more learning through play, even though it was super playful already, and more neurodiversity affirming kind of training, really. So the Brick by Brick programme, or Lego brick-based therapy, for those of you that don't know, it's a fun and it's a child-led play programme, and it's really a group programme, so for children to come together and play together, and it's designed to support social and emotional well-being. So it's often run in schools, in clinics, in health centres, in community settings. Usually it's like a once a week club for the children, but it really has a therapeutic benefit. And we've been lucky that in 2023, the Brick by Brick programme was selected for the 100th global collection of the most impactful and scalable educational innovations. So in the Brick by Brick programme, children play with Lego bricks, and they do so together. So not by yourself, they're doing it in a club and building together, either with one other child or with one other adult or with small groups of children. So you can have multiple children in a club building in little small groups. But crucially, a trained adult facilitator will support the children. And the children, when they're playing, they build skills, so many skills, but communication, social interaction, creativity, problem solving, and emotions. But most importantly, they make fun. They make friends and have fun. They make fun of each other. They might do, actually, quite often. But there's lots of different activities you can do in Brick Club. You might build in a team with different roles. So one child might be the engineer and show the instructions to everybody and tell people where the pieces go. One child might be the supplier and finds the right brick to put on the model. And one person might be the builder and put the model together, and they will decide when to take it in turns to play those different roles. But there's so much kind of scope for adaptation. So you might be able to create your own designs without instructions. We do robotics, stop motion animation. The idea is that, you know, the children, as Jamie said, have agency and some choice in what they're playing with and who they're building it with and what they do. So why have we chosen Lego bricks? Well, this sort of came out from, again, a child-led observation that children, and particularly autistic children in the case of Lego brick-based therapy, were drawn to Lego bricks. They're really interested in them and love playing with them. The sets with instructions are really logical and predictable, and that really suits children with good visuospatial skills and attention to detail. Lots of children say, and adults, that building Lego models is really calming. So if you've got a child who's maybe anxious more in a group situation, by having the Lego bricks there, it builds a bit of certainty. Aha, I know what Lego is, I know how to build it, I'm good at it, so they're less anxious in that social situation. You can get a real sense of satisfaction and achievement when you've completed your model, and you can play with it as well. But when you're designing your own models and maybe doing stop motion animation or thinking about the stories around the models you've made, there's huge potential for creativity and expression. And it can cater to like any interest or theme that the child or young person is interested in. So in Brick Clubs, we really focus on these 5 characteristics of learning through play. And these were articulated from the Lego Foundation's research. At Play Inclusion, very lucky to be partnered with the wonderful Lego Foundation, who are trying to increase the amount of learning through play going on around the globe. And these 5 characteristics show that if an activity is meaningful to the child, if they find it enjoyable and joyful, if it's actively engaging and interesting and they're involved, if they're socially interacting, and if they're trying things out, iterating and failing, trying again, learning about the world, making mistakes in a safe environment, all of these characteristics mean that a lot of learning is happening, and the learning is happening through play. And we also try and hang out in Brick Clubs in this potential sweet spot of the play spectrum. Again, this has come out of Lego Foundation's research, and there's a spectrum between completely free play, which is complete child choice. The child could do anything, has complete agency, could do whatever they like. And the other end of the spectrum is full instruction by an adult. So the adult telling the child exactly what to do, there's complete structure, and there's limited child choice. And in this sort of slightly peachy colour in the middle, that is where we try and hang out in Brick Clubs, because that is where research tells us the most learning and development happens. So the children have enough structure and guidance to feel safe and not uncertain, or the right amount of uncertainty, as Jamie was saying, but enough agency and choice to be able to experiment and push themselves and try things out. So that is just a really important kind of thing. There's no right or wrong way to be. Full instruction is great sometimes, and full free play is great sometimes. There's no kind of right or wrong place to be in this spectrum, but just trying to hover about the balance seems to give the most opportunity for learning and development. There is some research evidence for Lego brick-based therapy, and whilst we believe this methodology is appropriate for loads of different diagnoses or no diagnoses for children for all sorts of reasons, the main evidence base in the research literature has been with autistic children, and looking at the impact on social development, showing some positive impacts on social development. And this includes a randomized control trial, so with 240 autistic children between the ages of 7 and 15, and compared to educational support as usual, there were some small positive effects after just 6 weeks of Lego brick-based therapy delivered by staff in schools in the UK. But it was very feasible and acceptable to the people running it, and it was also deemed to be cost effective. We've done our own independent evaluation of our kind of reimagining of the Brick by Brick programme in 7 countries, so trying to look more internationally, and trying to get some more input from children. So 92% of children really enjoyed the Brick Club. There was increases in confidence, feeling more comfortable in a group, improvements in friendships, and better communication. And just some really lovely quotes here about our Reimagined Brick by Brick programme. And my favourite, which I say all the time, is Isaac, who says, "Me gusta más que la tablet," which, for those who don't speak Spanish, it means I like it more than my tablet. So to be better than an iPad is a pretty big win in my book. So yeah, this making friends, having fun, the kids are making improvements, feeling more confident, listening. Everyone's different, so it helps with stress. So really, really enjoyable. So before I hand over to Sinead, because I'm aware of time, Sinead, we can run over a little bit. Is the Brick by Brick programme right for me in my setting? Do the young people enjoy Lego building? If they do, go for it. Do they want to build with others and make friends? Would they like some support with social opportunities, communication, and managing feelings? Have you got the right setup to be able to deliver it? And are you someone who's playful with the right experience and training to run brick clubs? So I'm going to skip over to Sinead now, who's going to just talk you through her thoughts and experiences as a play therapist in relation to the Brick by Brick programme. So thank you so much, Sinead, for offering to share your views here.
Thank you. So as you can see here, this is the organisation I work in, the Play Therapy Centre. And we, as you can tell from my accent, we have centres across Northern Ireland, and I am based up in our Northwest Centre. I'm clinical director and senior play therapist in the Play Therapy Centre up in Derry. So what I want to kind of discuss today, if you're able to click along, Gina, in terms, is it working? Well, here we go. Thank goodness. I want to talk about the Play Therapy Continuum, the Play Therapy UK talk about, because that will help us understand where maybe each setting fits in terms of how they're using play and how they're targeting different areas of the brain, maybe using play as well. Go back to what Jamie talked about earlier in the webinar. I'll talk about the difference between play therapy and Brick by Brick, because a lot of play therapists and art therapists that work in our settings are really trying to figure out where that sits within their work as well. So I think it's really important to kind of maybe bring that into the conversation today as well. And then Brick by Brick in schools, I deliver brick clubs in schools. And I'm also, as well as being a facilitator, I also am one of the trainers here in Ireland of this play included way of working. So in terms of Brick Club in school, I'll talk a little bit about the experience that the teachers that I have trained have talked to me about, what the experience has been like for them. I want to talk a little bit about ethics as well, and about how sometimes with the best intentions in the world, we can do work and play with children, but what are we really trying to achieve, and sometimes are we doing more harm than good potentially with the children we're working with? So I'll talk a bit about that, and then Gina's going to send maybe out some information if anybody's interested in any upcoming training that we have maybe here in Ireland or further afield as well. Okay, Gina, if you want to move us on to the next one. So this is the Play Therapy Continuum, the Play Therapy UK have it. This is the way that we would work and kind of describe what Jamie talked about, the universal benefits of play for everyone. And as we say here in Ireland, when I ask my little boy, how do you describe play? And he describes it as having the crack. So it's having fun, basically what that means in Ireland. So having some fun and just playing with your friends. Play work then is slightly different. So that's what a lot of teachers would talk to me about, is where they would see themselves fitting on this play therapy continuum, because in a school setting, they may use play for learning. For learning about the world around us, learning about colours, learning about shapes, learning about anything at all, that they may have their play corners in school. And then as we kind of go a little bit deeper, then therapeutic play is sometimes where I maybe see where the Brick Club maybe fits as well. It's sort of a bridge between the play work and play therapy. I do a lot of training for different organisations, and there was a training I did recently with quite a large organisation here in Northern Ireland, and they struggled. They thought that they were, example, doing play therapy, but whenever we actually got to the crux of where they fit in the continuum, they realized they were actually doing therapeutic play. And how we were able to describe it on the day of the training is that they said that they were snorkeling, and play therapy is when you're scuba diving. And I thought that was a really good example of where kind of everything sits, because if you think about tier 2 services, for example, tier 2 services that are maybe delivering services within the community, that's how they would see themselves, in terms of that they maybe don't have necessarily the qualifications to go a bit deeper with the child with the play, but that they can stay at a level that is appropriate to the service that they're running and the qualifications that they have. So play therapy is a bit deeper, and then going further on from that is the psychology, clinical psychology or psychotherapy, going a little bit deeper. That's your deep sea diving whenever you're going down there. But I really think it's really important where this sits in terms of Brick Club, because how children sometimes enter schools that I work in may either start in a Brick Club, and a teacher may see that they need to scuba dive down a bit deeper into the nervous system to regulate themselves a bit deeper, and then they move from the brick by brick program down into play therapy. But in play therapy, when we're very deep and doing the deep work, we can't come up too quick, a bit like when you're scuba diving. If you come up too quick, you can get deep in decompression sickness, you know? So it's a bit like that, where we need to come up very slowly to a level where children are able to sustain maybe scuba diving a little bit before they go back onto land again. So for that, I think this is where the Brick Clubs fit in really beautifully, and particularly in a school setting as well, if schools are able to kind of do any of this training or any of this work. Okay, Gina, if you want to move on to the next slide. So the difference then between play therapy and the brick by brick. So if you think about in terms of neuroscience, where the brain fits, whenever anything happens to us in life, whether it's trauma with a small t, trauma with a capital T, whether it's large anxiety, small anxiety, and stresses, all of the stress comes in via the right brain hemisphere. Okay, and we needed to shift that across to be able to process it over to the left hemisphere of the brain, which is our understanding brain. And in order to do that in play therapy, we're able to use a lot of our creative techniques to be able to shift it across. But how I normally talk about the Lego clubs or the Lego brick by brick program is that it's a very analytical way of working. It's very cognitive in how it works as well, because if you're thinking about, it's a skill-based program. So if the right brain is an expression and discharge of emotional states, then we must also help to embed that within the brain and the hemisphere in the skill-based part of the brain. So we need to integrate the entire brain. And I think having, if a school, for example, was able to have a play therapist and have staff trained in brick by brick, then we're able to integrate the entire brain of the children that we have within our settings. And I just think personally that would be my aim, is to have every school in Northern Ireland trained in brick by brick, to be able to do that, and have a play therapist in every school. That is the dream. A creative therapist of some kind. Okay, Gina, if you want to move on. So in terms of the experience that I have of working in schools and also training lots of school staff, and I've also trained trusts, for example, Rise and I have done this training. We have done just various organizations have really bought into this way of working. But I think in a school in particular, for example, it supports the SENCOs in their strategic role, because there's a very key role that SENCOs, and not just the SENCOs, but all the staff have in being able to meet a child in their AEP or their PLP, whenever a child is on that, they have a very clear role, and this helps to tie into that because the brick by brick program can be written into the PLP. It can be written in as the strategy that the school are using to support a child. Another thing that this training does as well is it achieves skill proficiency amongst all of the key staff. For me, this is a really, it's gold star in terms of the training, if I'm honest with you, because I think that the brick by brick program, along with the play therapy, it really gives staff an insight into how the neurological way that this works for children and how to support that from the brain in terms of bottom up and not top down, which often happens within different supports within organizations. And also, for me, being able to bring in this way of working in schools and best support for children in a familiar setting. So if we think of children who I work with at the minute in particular, they don't go to football, they don't go to karate, they don't go to choir, they don't go to anything. And parents are really struggling to get them involved in any activity outside of school. And sometimes they don't even want to go to school, a lot of them. So, but the days that I run the play therapy and the brick by brick in schools, that's the day the children comes to school. So if you kind of think about that's the setting, that's where we're capturing all of these children. That's where we're able to do this work. And children feel safe and secure there in a very familiar environment. And then the final factor, I feel, is whenever parents are choosing a school for their child. This is another thing that I've noticed as well in terms of play, is that parents, when they're wanting to choose a particular school for their child, they are starting to notice what schools are offering different, particularly very outcome-based platforms for their children. So whether it is play therapists in the schools I work in, they both offer play therapy and the brick by brick. And those are the things that parents are saying, that is why I'm sending my child to this school. So for principals, for example, it's a real hook for principals in getting the numbers up in their schools. So this, in terms of like the fact, it's not just beneficial to the children, it's beneficial to the entire school community. Okay, Gina. So then we're nearly at a close here now, but I just wanted to talk about ethics around all of this as well, because what I said at the beginning was that some people with the best will in the world and the most loveliest hearts in the world want to be able to deliver, for example, Lego therapy or play therapy, but they may not have the training. And for me, the governance around the way that we work as play therapists, or as the brick by brick program works as well, and play included, is that with the governance of that I suppose I find that schools are reassured and parents are reassured also that the way that we work is highly ethical and that we have got the appropriate training, because anyone who, for example, would want to attend any of the brick club training have to be on a register already, whether that is a play therapy register, a speech and language register, an occupational therapist register. So the governance around this, everyone has peace of mind basically whenever their school is buying in a service. And the fact that it is research based as well, that is what all funders are looking for. So an organisation who want to go for funding bids, if they're seen to be aligning themselves with an organisation or a play therapist that is registered, will be more likely to achieve and achieve the funding for their organisation. Another real thing for me was around the register of approved facilitators. Having that register, again, it's back to the governance, but I think that all organisations want to make sure that they adhere to. And having that register, you can find a therapist or a play therapist on the Play Therapy UK register, for example. That's the one that I'm on, but also I'm also on the Play Included register, both as a facilitator and as a trainer. So again, that gives peace of mind. And the fact that it's approved by the Lego Foundation, I think that's, you know, another, I think whenever you're looking at, for example, training, look at all these gold star, tick, 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 it's all there, you know. So essentially it gives everyone peace of mind for whatever they're choosing, whether it's a facilitator for their school, their organisation, or for yourself as a trainer. Okay, Gina, do you want to move on to the next, or is that us now? Yeah, other questions? So that's
Yeah,
it.
we're gonna go for some
I hope
questions.
you can understand my accent, everybody.
I love your accent, Sinead. It's a fabulous accent. We are a little bit over time, so I just want to head over before we come to questions. I would love to be able to gather a wee bit of feedback. Here is a Padlet. We've also got a little poll. So I just want to launch that little poll just to get your satisfaction. We're going to do questions in a minute, but how satisfied are you with what information you've shared? So I know some people have to dash off, so I just want to gather a bit of feedback. And if you can fill in this Padlet, that would be amazing. We will come to questions. I know that Abby has put some questions in the chat, but I'm just aware that lots of people, we're kind of 10 minutes over time now. So if people have to leave, that would be great to get some feedback. On that Padlet, we've asked you to say what you used to think, what you now think, and what you wonder about. And what we'll do is we'll share that feedback when we email out the recording. We would like to share the findings of that Padlet with you all. And here is some lots and lots of information. So I'll leave that information on while we go through the questions. If that makes any sense. I've done things in a backward order. So we've got a question from Fran. Thank you, Fran. What ages would you recommend for Brick Club? That's a great question. I think it's so adaptable. You can do it with so many different age groups, but depending on what kind of Lego activities you do. So even early years, you can adapt it to use Duplo and to sort of make it simpler right up to adulthood. So I think we've got different play zones in our training to show how to adapt it to different, not only ages, but kind of developmental ages as well. So different needs of the young person. But Lego bricks are very clearly age bracketed. And then it's about looking at how skilled they are socially and communication wise to be in a group. I hope that answers your question, Fran. Gabrielle Maris Mora, thank you for your question. Do you have an evaluation or monitoring sheet we can use in the Lego group? Yes, we do. And we're also creating a really cool online one. Watch this space coming this year. We've got a progress monitoring tool on the way, but we've got paper versions at the moment. And when you've done the training, we have access to a suite of resources that you can download on our portal for Play Included members. So but feel free to contact us. We've got wonderful Maggie, Dr. Margaret Laurie in our team, who is our research and evaluation specialist. So she can also help you with any research. I've got a question from Kira. Are the papers mentioned by Jamie widely available, or do you require membership or payment to access them, Jamie?
So both those papers I put up are open access. So you'll be able to just, just Google the title, we'll pop it into Google Scholar, and it'll come up and you'll click through. They're both open access, which, is fantastic, because I share those frustrations when things are stuck behind paywalls, but people are generally pretty good these days at finding a way to get papers out there, even if they're sort of preprint versions and things like that. But both of those two open access.
Fantastic. And I had a question for you, Jamie. It sounds like particular types of play are more important, like risky play for mental health. Is that right? And they're kind of different types of play that are more beneficial than other types of play, or is any play good?
I think any play is good. You're exploring and you're testing and you're trying things out in that kind of low stakes environment. So you're always going to be learning. Learning has to happen in uncertainty. You have to be presented with something that contradicts your existing model of the world. Otherwise, there's no catalyst for changing that model and therefore kind of learning. So all kind of opportunities for novelty, for trying things out are great, but there is a big body of work that's really focused on what used to be termed risky play, but has been rebranded adventurous play because nobody really wants to greenlight risky play. But adventurous play is great. And yes, so, and as that paper I put up there, Helen Dodd's work looks a lot at the benefits of risky play in particular for managing anxiety, There's also a really nice and a really cool lab called the Recreational Fear Lab. And they do lots of cool research around like scary play. And that's with adults, you know, so watching horror films, going to haunted houses, those sorts of things. Again, there's kind of simulated high stakes, if that makes sense. So that exposure to what could appear to be high stakes, but in a low stakes environment.
Yeah, yeah, we had awesome fun in a haunted house with my little girl in Legoland, actually in Billund recently. I love all that. Thank you very much. I think that's it for the questions. Thank you all so much. I will bring all this to an end. I'll stop sharing my screen somehow. I'm not sure quite how to do that, to be honest. I've got no stop share button. So we'll just have to have that slide. But yeah, huge thanks to everybody for attending today. We're so appreciative to all of you. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I've really loved hearing Sinead and Jamie's experiences. Thank you so much, Sinead and Jamie, for your time, and we'll share the recording with you all. But if you have any other questions, we can absolutely answer those through hello@playincluded, which is our email address, which hopefully Abby or Jane can put in the chat. And you know, feel free to look at Special Networks website, amazing stuff going on there. And Sinead's got some amazing courses coming up at the Play Therapies Centre. So huge thanks to all of you, and have a lovely playful rest of the day. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you so much. Bye. Bye.
Bye bye.